keynote speaker, CEO and innovator of Super Happy Couples, and she is just the guru of workplace happiness, which I think in the conventional day and age is almost an oxymoron, but she's about to change that paradigm. So please, warm welcome for Valerie.
So raise your hand if right now you manage another human being in your job. And it doesn't have to be a giant workplace. It can be your virtual assistant online. And if you didn't raise your hand if you believe you will someday be managing another human being. Okay. When you manage another person, it is your job to get the best out of them, to motivate them and to inspire them. And if you are just good at everything else you do, but you are excellent at getting great work out of other people, that is the most important skill you can have. That skill will pay off exponentially and for a very, very long time. And I will tell you, the only focus you need to successfully manage other people is to care about their happiness. Happiness matters a lot. And let's talk about why that is. It's because unhappiness is expensive. Unhappiness costs American companies between $450 and $550 billion a year. That's not a made-up number. Gallup has been studying this for 2 decades, and that's from their latest State of the American Workforce report. So in what ways is unhappiness expensive? How do unhappy employees cost you money? Anybody? The bad productivity? What else? Turnover. They quit. They don't care. They're not innovative. They don't show up. They make your workplace less happy for other people. When an unhappy person in your workplace makes other people unhappy, guess who quits? I'll tell you who quits. The people who have options. The people who can go elsewhere are the ones who quit, which means you're good employees. Your bad employees are unhappy and they stay. But there's a lot more expenses to unhappiness than just turnover and absenteeism. There's theft. There's bad customer service. Unhappy employees are the ones who steal your corporate secrets and sell them to your competitors. Happy employees don't do that. Also, studies have now shown unhappy employees have more workers' compensation claims and higher value. Unhappy employees are more likely to engage in workplace bullying and violence, which is extremely high liability for you. If you're in charge of people, you want them to be engaged. Engaged employees are creative. They innovate. They do business development for you. They bring in customers. They bring in other employees for you. So engagement is going to be one of your highest priorities. But there is a giant disconnect in this country between what actually motivates employees and what management thinks motivates employees. Like I said, there are major studies on this. There's 3 large national studies on workplace happiness. One is at Harvard Business School, one is at UC Riverside, and the other one is Gallup, the State of the American Workforce. They produced that report. I highly recommend download it and read it, especially if you are in charge of other people. So today, what we're going to talk about in terms of employee engagement and happiness is motivation, appreciation, and incentives. So how do we know there's a disconnect between what employers think makes their employees happy and what actually makes their employees happy? Well, Teresa Mabile is the head of research at the Harvard Business School. And all of those happiness studies that I mentioned came to the same conclusion, which is that the #1 factor in the happiness of your employees is their sense of accomplishment. Now, think about that. Of course that makes sense. What was your best day at work ever? Was it the day you played foosball? Or was it the day you got something amazing done? We can give our employees a sense of accomplishment. It doesn't matter what their job is. The Harvard Business School study used the phrase making progress. And they say making progress on work that's meaningful. So even if your employee's job is to turn a screw on an assembly line, right? You have to plant somebody somewhere and they have to turn a screw on an assembly line. On that person's first day, and on several days when you think of it after, you walk that person to the very front of the assembly line and you say, here's where the raw materials come in. And here's the person who takes those raw materials and assembles them this way. And here's the person who changes their shape. And here's the person who divides these into parts. And here's where you stand. And when you turn this screw, you honor all of their work and you make it possible for everyone after you to do their work. And then you walk them down the rest of that line. You say, and here's the person who follows you and is so grateful that you did that part. And here at the end, we have this beautiful product that our customers love. How is that person going to feel now every day when they stand there and turn that screw? There's a story about John Kennedy touring NASA for the first time. And he was walking through NASA and he saw a man mopping the floor. And he walked up to him and he says, oh, hello, sir, I'm John Kennedy. What do you do here? And the man looked at him and he said, I'm here to put a man on the moon. That's how your employees should feel about your workplace. So Teresa Mobley at Harvard came to the conclusion that making progress on meaningful work is the #1 motivator for employees. So she did a different study. She had 669 managers rank 5 different activities that the manager could take to motivate their workforce. So she gave them 5 different things and said, of these 5 things, how do you rank how effective they are? And one of those things was providing support for employees to make progress. Now we know making progress is the #1 motivator. So out of 669 managers across a broad range of industries and at various levels of management, how many of them do you think ranked this as the #1 way to motivate their employees? The managers. How many managers thought out of 669? 0. 0 ranked this #1. In fact, 95% of them ranked it last. Out of 5 different ways to motivate employees, 95% think that this is the least effective way. You have to give your employees the space to get a sense of accomplishment from what they're doing. If they get that sense of accomplishment, they're going to want to come back every day and do it over and over and over. But the big disconnect is that we have more managers who believe that fear motivates more than accomplishment. That's in a separate study, but by a large percentage. Managers rank fear as a motivator higher than accomplishment for their own employees. How does this happen? How do we get such an enormous disconnect? It is because of what I call accidental managers. I'm sure everybody got an instant thought, oh, I know what she means by that. We have a great majority of people in management positions in this country are in those positions because they got put there by virtue of title or education or seniority, years with the company. They are put in charge of other people without ever being given any managerial training. I do happiness in the workplace talks at law firms, at large law firms sometimes. They always want their staff to do it. The irony. You know, if your lawyers were happier, your staff wouldn't need the workshop. But when I go in and I talk to them about managing, and I say, how many managers do you have here? And they'll say, oh, about 12. And I'm like, really? Because you have 300 attorneys. And every one of them has an assistant. Every one of them works with paralegals. The great majority of them work with junior associates. That means every one of those people is a manager. And I know that they got no managerial training because I was one. There is no managerial training in law school. In fact, I went back to Berkeley Law and taught for a semester, and I took an hour out of my syllabus to teach. Here's how you speak to your assistant. And my students thought that was a big waste of time. That even showed up in the evaluation, like, ugh, she covered things that didn't matter. And then a year or 2 years later, I started getting the emails. Oh my God, thank you so much. I had no idea how much a difference it would make just to thank my assistant for doing good work. Or I've watched other people and how they talk to their assistants, and I am astounded by how badly they do it, or how badly I would have done it if I wasn't told differently. See, one of the big problems we have is we believe that managerial skills are instinctive, that they're natural, that the things that make people good managers come naturally to us. That couldn't be farther from the truth. But upper management assumes that middle and lower management knows the basics. Things like acknowledge in public, admonish in private. You don't correct somebody in front of their colleagues or your customers. Has anyone here ever been in a business when someone was being corrected or was dressed down in front of you? Have you ever been? I had it happen 2 weeks ago. I had a meeting with a woman in a real estate agency, an investor in my company, and while I was sitting in the lobby waiting for her, one of her agents was literally screaming at the receptionist. So as soon as she and I met, I said to her, this happened, and she's like, oh, that will never happen again. And I said, yeah, because I can tell you if I was here to buy a house, I would have turned around and walked out. So unfortunately, most workplaces are governed by the tyranny of the urgent. Something's going wrong, something's happening, fix it, do this. Who went wrong? What was the problem? As a manager, it is not your job to react. It is your job to respond. When something is happening, stop, figure out what needs to be fixed, figure out who needs to address it. If somebody is making a mistake or is causing a problem, you go to that person, you say, I need to speak to you a minute. And walk into a place where you can close the door. I don't care if it's the supply closet. Walk in and close the door, and then discuss what's going wrong and what's happening. And the opposite of that is acknowledge in public. Praise your employees publicly and often, especially employees who are in low-profile positions. If somebody is sitting in a back office coding all day, make sure that some point in the break room or during a stand-up or at some point when everyone's together, you say, God, you did an awesome job with that debugging. Thank you so much. Praising people in front of other people makes them want to come back every day. People give you what you expect of them. Anyone who has children knows this, but it's also true with your employees. If you expect excellence, you get excellence. If you expect dishonesty, you get dishonesty. So expect great work, you will get great work, but make sure you acknowledge it. One of the most important things we can do is show our appreciation. Show your appreciation for your employees. And then when you focus on their happiness, if you are part of a larger organization, make employee happiness a metric in their review and in the review of their managers. When you review managers and you review your policies on how happy they make your employees, you get much better managers and much happier employees. So we motivate our employees by giving them a sense of accomplishment. That means we don't rob them of their sense of accomplishment as well. And one of the number one complaints employees have about their company or their boss is when somebody changes the goal line. When someone says, hey, do A, B, and C, and you've done A, you're about partway through B, and they come around and go, great, do X, Y, and Z. You're like, wait, what did I do? The way this usually looks is, say it's a slow week, and so the boss says, hey, we have all these invoices. We need to go through and put them in numerical order, or like dollar value order. We need to see who our biggest customers are. We need to see what their follow-on orders were. Can you arrange all of that? And the assistant's like, oh yeah, I'll get started on that. And then a customer calls and says, my shipment didn't arrive. And the boss says, hey, Bob, track that shipment. Okay, that's because you as the boss know exactly what's going on and what the priorities are. Bob is lower on the ladder than you are. And when somebody is on a lower rung of a ladder, what kind of a view do they have? All they see is you. They don't see everything that you can see from your rung on the ladder. And so you don't even think you changed the goal line on that person at that moment, but you did. It's so destabilizing to be halfway through a task and be told to do another task. Because then you don't know, okay, was I too slow? Did I not do this right? Am I making a mistake? Should I have done that other thing in the first place? And destabilizing an employee like that, it seems so minor, but when that person leaves at the end of the day, they've been robbed of their sense of accomplishment and they feel like they've failed somehow at their job. And worse, they feel like they failed you as their manager. And they just don't leave happy. So you can say, stop with those invoices, go track this shipment. That takes 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Stop the invoices, track the shipment. Or you can say, hey, thank you so much for working on those invoices. I just got off a call from a customer who can't find their shipment. That's more important, so I need you to do that right now. I know you can handle that. And when you're done, go back to the invoices. That took 10 seconds. And you might be thinking, oh, why do I have to do that? Why do I have to spend 10 seconds speaking like that? That kind of communication might stop 1 or 2 sick days this year. That might keep that person from quitting at the end of the year. That's going to keep that person from going home and being like, I hate my job. And you know what happens when somebody goes home and says, I hate my job? What happens at home? They take it with them. And if there's someone else at home, what is that person going to say to them? Quit. Get out. What did you say, Mike?
I hate my spouse.
Yes. Oh, no, believe me. A very quick side note, one of the stories I had to cut from this. I used to work for a CEO who was insane. I mean, just insane. And I quit. And a month later, a friend was visiting, and she's like, hey, how are things going with you and Rick? Rick is my husband. I'm like, oh, my God, they're so good. Like, we're so happy finally. He's really paying attention. We're communicating a lot better. He has really gotten better. And she looked at me. She said, yeah, and you're not working for the crazy lady anymore. It hadn't even occurred to me that the reason I was not enjoying my marriage was because I worked for somebody who was insane. And I have a much longer story about how insane she was, but catch me at the break, it's hysterical. But what I just said, I'm gonna break it down. Hey, thanks for working on those invoices. That's appreciation. We just got a call from a customer and who didn't get their shipment. I need you to track that, clear direction. And that's important, so I know you can handle it. Confidence in their ability. And then when you're done, go back to the invoices. Again, the second part of clear direction. So when you communicate with your employees, every communication with your employee should be appreciation, clear directions, and confidence in their abilities. Now, you're like, I am never gonna remember that. How in the world am I gonna know? Appreciation, clear direction, and confidence. And I say, you rock your employees with AC/DC. Yo! Appreciation, clear direction, and confidence in their abilities is the way to communicate. It's the way to communicate that will inspire them, it will motivate them, it will make them want to give you their best, especially when you express confidence. Expressing confidence in an employee's ability will always get you to give them, they want to live up to that. So another way to motivate employees is with incentives. Now a lot of companies are getting this wrong right now. They're putting in the foosball table. They're giving free breakfast, free lunch. They're just saying, here, freebies. Like if you show up at the office one day with cookies and you say, hey everybody, I brought cookies. They're gonna love you, and that's great, yay, cookies. But when you attach that to an accomplishment, you get so much more loyalty and so much more happiness. You don't walk in and say, hey, I brought cookies. You walk in and say, you guys killed it on those quarterly reports, so I got us a basket of cookies. It sounds so small, doesn't it? But suddenly, that cookie represents your accomplishment. It represents appreciation. It represents that you're good at your job. And now you're so much happier with you have it. And incentives can be done both ways. You can, if you know something is coming up that is going to be for the employee's benefit, turn it into an incentive. Like you have a nasty old Mr. Coffee and you want to replace it with like a shiny new Keurig. Look at what your employees have coming up. Look at a goal that they are going to achieve, something they're going to achieve. This doesn't have to be a stretch goal. You want to buy the Keurig. But let's say everybody has to participate in revamping the marketing department, and that's got to happen this month. Then you sit down with everyone, you're like, guys, you know what? We're going to revamp the marketing department. I think you're going to kill it. And when we're done with that, I'm getting a Keurig for the break room. Now that sounds really trivial, but I will tell you, they're doing the work anyway, and now they're much more inspired, they're much more motivated, they feel much more like a team. But the ongoing effects are remarkable, because every single time they use that Keurig, they're reminded, this is because I earned this. I got us here. My company appreciates me. And that's really important. Expressing appreciation for what our employees do for us is really important. The other thing, the studies that show that accomplishment is the #1 factor in making employees love their jobs, say that the #2 factor is autonomy. Autonomy. Our employees want control over what they do. And again, go back to your best day of work ever. It was not only the day you got a lot done, but it was the day everybody just let you be. Don't rob your employees of their autonomy. If they do something differently than you would, that doesn't make it wrong. If you've told them to do something, they're doing it. If it's not the way you would do it, go look at what they're doing and see if it'll get you there. If you need to get from here to here, and there's a big block here, and your method is to go this way, and your employee starts going this way, don't storm in there and say, you've got to get up here, because you've got to be on this path. Look at what a waste that is, and look at how demotivating that is. Look at the policies within your company and see if your policies are taking away your employees' autonomy. I do a lot of work in the supply chain industry, and this is, across the board, I hear from drivers, oh, we have this stupid routing system that I have to follow or I get dinged. Like literally, like they track me, and if I don't follow the route they set out for me, and I have so many drivers like, I know this town better than that. If they would just let me take the route I want to take, I would get there better. So again, if you factor the employee happiness into the outcome you desire, into the policies you're creating, not only are you going to get happier employees, you're going to get much more efficient policies. Has anybody here ever worked in a workplace where they were changing something drastically and never asked you? They never bothered to say, hey, you're the person who actually uses this product. What would you like for it to be? My sister is one of the leading headhunters in Knoxville, Tennessee, and her company decided that they weren't getting their invoices paid quickly enough, so they revamped the whole CRM system to make it all about the billing and all about getting the invoices paid. And one of the results they came up with is that when the invoice got paid, it got moved into sort of a paid file, and it wiped out all the other information. So let's say she sent 8 candidates in for a job, and 1 got hired, but the company loved 3 of them anyway and said, next opening we have, we want these 3. All of that data disappeared. And they never asked. They never even asked the people on the recruiting side, how would you manage this? So within your company, bring everybody into the decision making. Again, that will make them more happy. They'll see how the decision-making process happened. It can't happen, 1,000 employees, you can't do that. But a lot of the decision-making can include the people who are going to be affected by those decisions. And also, a lot of times companies make a decision that doesn't seem to be in the best interest of the employees, but there were other considerations. And for whatever reason, we hide this from our employees. That's ridiculous. How many people have ever been on a plane where they say, well, I know you've all been. Put your seat back up in the full upright and locked position before we land. And you're looking around and like 3 or 4 people don't have theirs up. How much more effective would it be if they said, put your seat in the upright and locked position, because if it's not locked and something goes wrong on the landing, you will spring backwards, you'll be trapped in your seat, and you'll trap the person behind you. Suddenly you're like, I need this seat to be locked. And I need the guy in front of me to be locked. Now you have a whole team of advocates on that plane making sure all those seats are locked. communicate the effects and the decision making, and you get your employee buy-in for it, but you also get a lot less disgruntlement when they're dealing with the outcomes of it. And speaking of disgruntlement, has anyone here ever worked in a workplace where somebody was toxic? Okay. And everybody has their own definition. Oh, come on. Oh. Let's get back to this. There we go. Yay. Tech CEO. When I say that, everybody has their own definition of toxic. Like, just toss out some things that you regard as toxic. Complaining, big one, and that's contagious. Gossip, another big one. Bad attitude, manipulation, bullies. There's all kinds of ways that people are toxic in your workplace, but there is one universal truth of toxic people. They cost you good people. And how many people have ever been in a workplace where somebody was toxic and management knew that person was toxic and did nothing about it? And you know, it's interesting, when I ask that question, hands always go like this. Because you remember, that could have been your high school job when you were 16 and you still remember. My mom, her first job ever, she was 18 years old, she worked in a steno pool. There was an insurance company where there were 9 desks of girls who were steno, and the executives were all on the outside and when they needed somebody. And this was in a day and age where office equipment was heavy duty and expensive, and so they had one stapler for the steno pool. And the stapler sat at the desk of the woman in the center. And later in life, my mom nicknamed her the stapler Nazi. Because God help you if you had to staple something. She kept it locked in her desk. You had to ask her to unlock her desk to get the stapler out. If she was at lunch, you couldn't staple anything. And everyone in the workplace knew it. And so every one of those young women who was a steno that worked around her left. And they were good. They were good at their jobs, and they left. I did a talk at the legal department of a major retailer, and I got to this section of the talk, it was a much longer day, and we had a whole thing on toxic people. And I noticed everyone in the room doing this at one person. So during the break, I went and talked to her. And I said, hi, tell me about your job here. And it very quickly revealed itself. So at the end of the day, I went and talked to the general counsel for the company who had brought me in. And as we're talking, I said, oh, and you have a toxic person in your workplace. And he's like, oh, I know. And then he looked at me and said, wait a minute, who are you talking about? And I said the name. And he said, you've been here an hour. How would you know that? And I said, well, it reveals itself, but you need to get rid of her. And he said, oh, I need her. I need her. And I said, all right, then I'm going to give you some homework. I want you to write down everybody you've lost in the last 2 years. And I want you to rank them on a scale of 1 to 10, how valuable they were to you. And then I want you to draw a spiral coming out from her and plot each of those people on it for how close they were to her. And 2 weeks later, he called me and he said, she's gone. And I said, I thought so. See, it's like the frog in the pot of water. We don't pay attention to how our toxic employees are affecting our bottom line. If you have a toxic employee, it is not an automatic can. You don't have to automatically fire. There's a lot of things you can do. You take that person into a room. First off, you're having a conversation about their behavior. This is not a negotiation. They're going to get defensive. They're going to swear they're not the problem. They're going to tell you who everyone else is the problem. You just let them express themselves, and you smile, and then you say, okay, your behavior has to change. That's not negotiable. Now, one really good approach to that is to use the phrase, and write this one down, I'm wondering if you're aware. I'm wondering if you're aware of how it affects the people who work with you when you complain every day. I'm wondering if you're aware what your tone of voice does to the people on your team. invite that person to be enlightened. Start a conversation and get that conversation to the point where you make them aware, and then you give them the tools to change. You might have to send that person to some training, or you might just have to say, you know, here are some things I need you to do. There's a really good technique, I use it in my company, called HALT. HALT. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? If you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, do not do what you're about to do. I had a contractor turn in some work for us that it was at the end of a bad day. Other contractors had really, really, really messed something up. So this woman did nothing more than turn in something that just wasn't what I expected, and I wrote the worst email. It was scathing. I mean, it would like peel the skin off a potato. And I felt it in myself, and I said, halt. Okay, I'm not hungry, but I am angry, and I am tired. So I sent it to my co-founder, and I said, what do you think? Can I send this? And she wrote back, dear God, do not send that. Because she's going to say, take your work and find someone else. So the next morning I rewrote it with just all the corrective action we needed on her work, and now she's doing amazing work for us. So make sure you aren't the toxic person as well. But don't allow toxic to continue in your workplace. It will cost you more than you could possibly imagine. So focus on the happiness of your employees. It doesn't require a whole-scale culture shift. It doesn't. It requires minor adjustments in how you motivate, how you appreciate, and how you incentivize. Just minor adjustments. And this applies in every workplace, because every workplace has concerns about absenteeism. Every workplace has concerns about theft. They all have concerns about security and safety of their workforce. Everyone has concerns about being able to attract the right talent. Everybody has concerns about turnover. But where if absenteeism is a problem, if theft is a problem, security is a problem, if recruiting and retaining employees is a problem, happiness is the solution. So thank you. I am Valerie Alexander. If you want individual techniques on how to be happy yourself, I have a book called Happiness as a Second Language. So you can find that on Amazon or wherever books are sold. And this is my contact information. This laptop is going away pretty soon. It's not mine. So if you want to make sure you capture the contact information, if you can't read it in the back, it says Valerie Alexander, speakhappiness.com, and I'm Valerie at speakhappiness.com. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Man, I love your presentations. They're so insightful. I was totally touched by that. I feel that a lot of people here are, because your message is not only accurate, but also valid. I think there's a lot of people here that can relate to previous job experiences where they worked in a toxic environment, or they weren't appreciated, and maybe their manager was giving them the wrong sort of incentives or focusing on the fear tactic. And that doesn't really work long term. So if you're on the receiving side of that, that sucks, sorry. But maybe we can learn from our own experiences, and definitely from your wisdom, and learn how to be better, more effective communicators and managers, so we can ultimately get everything that we want, including happy employees and better productivity. We're going to open up to Q&A now. John's going to walk around with the mic. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Valerie's going to be sticking around with us for story time afterwards, so if you have a comment or a story that you'd like to share, please save that for offline, as we only have about 10 minutes for Q&A, so let's try to get through this quickly. Thanks.
How can you tell if you're the issue in your workplace?
If you're in a leadership role, there are really easy metrics: absenteeism and turnover. If it's a larger workplace, the whole company should be tracking absenteeism and turnover by manager. If your company is not doing that, you are missing one of the most important metrics you could possibly have, because you can see when people don't want to work with you. And there is a level of self-awareness that is required. If every time you walk up to the same person, they're like, oh, you know what, that person might be a problem, observe them. If they do that every time anybody walks up to them, okay, counsel that person. If they only do it when it's you, That's a conversation you need to have. And you need to have that conversation from a place of open acceptance. You need to sit down with that person and say, hi, I think there is a disconnect between us because you don't really seem to enjoy working with me, and we have to work together for both of us to achieve the best we can. So let me know what behavior what you need changed. And there might be things you need changed. Again, it should be a dialogue. But by all means, if you're self-awareness is probably the most valuable gift you can possibly give yourself in terms of being a successful manager. Yeah. Yes.
Here. Hi. So I'm just coming from last weekend doing a Scrum Master certification, which was really enlightening. And I know you're a tech CEO, and there's a lot of different approaches with, agile approach and Scrum, where the team is self-empowered and commits and that sort of thing. And that was one of the things you touched briefly on. And I was just wondering how, with all the research you've done on happiness, is there a connection that you've noticed between all of these tech approaches and tech frameworks that are also, in a sense, trying to achieve a happy workforce?
It's really interesting because Agile is such a controversial method. Leadership loves it because it feels like there's a lot of reporting, a lot is getting done, and it feels like there's a big team thing. But actually, if you talk to a lot of individual engineers, they kind of hate it. A lot of them hate having to stop what they're doing at 3 o'clock every day to go stand in a circle and announce what they did. Has anybody worked in an Agile environment? And raise your hand if you didn't love it. Okay, yeah. I know with my own team, they asked me not to do. They're like, we don't need a daily check-in. Like, we'll each check in with you. We'll tell you what we're doing, but we don't need to stop what we're doing at this moment. Now, when we're in a larger team, we're in a larger group, we may do that. I really believe you need to ask your team what is going to be best for them, and then make sure that you're still getting the best work out of them. And if it's not, then as a group, figure out, how do we get there? Like, we missed these 3 deadlines. What happened? Because I know you guys don't want to have a scrum. I know you don't want to stand up daily and say what you're doing, but we're missing deadlines. Talk to me about how to motivate you. What is stopping us from doing that? Bring them into the conversation. If they want that agile environment, by all means do it. But if you have engineers who are resistant to it, what you don't want is the half and half. You don't want like a stand-up where 4 people don't have to be there, but everybody else does. You have to figure out how to balance that within your own workplace, but it really has to be customized. I know a lot of companies instantly, they read that Agile manifesto and they were like, we are gonna have this happen in our company. And there's a lot of things that seem cool and hip and actually don't work. There's another one, the whole open workspace thing in companies where it's just a giant desk and everybody works at the same giant desks. Turns out that for programming, for coding, that is one of the worst things you can happen. Like, I know that when we move into offices, we're a distributed team right now, but when we move into offices, there are going to be offices with closed doors that somebody can go in an office and close a door to do their work if they feel that that's a way to do better work for them. And that's what you really have to respond to, what your team needs and wants and what's going to get them to give you the best work. Yes.
Hi, Valerie. Let's say, what would you advise if you had a boss who's the toxic one and you're the employee? So you don't want to quit the job, because that's probably all the answers a lot of people had done, all the examples you had given. So what would be the best thing you could do?
There's a couple things. The talk I gave today is part of a much longer keynote, and one of the sections in that keynote is how to make yourself happy at work every day. So I'll give you just a couple techniques that are really useful if your boss is toxic. One of the most important things you can do is decide to start and end your day happy. So at the beginning of your day, when you're in the car on the way into work, think of everything that makes you happy. Just rattle off the list of all the things in life that make you happy. So you're starting your day happy. The most important part of ending your day happy is ending your day. At the end of your workday, it's done. You don't take it home. It doesn't matter what the boss did. It doesn't matter whatever ends your day, whether it's leaving your office, whether it's finalizing that last email, whatever it is, There's a longer technique I do with Post-it notes where you post the things you're going to do, you post something you did it, and then you crumple up the Post-it note at the end of the day and throw it away. That ends your day. So when you end your day, you can leave that boss behind. It doesn't matter what happened that day. There's another thing that is really valuable. It's a little woo-woo. Sometimes people are like, oh, whatever. It's kind of new agey, Valerie. Construct energy shields. And work on your own personal energy shield that's going to be effective for you. For me, it's a sheet of ice. For some people, it's like strong wind. Some people, it's fire. Some people, it's bars. Just make sure it's something you can see through. I did a talk once, and a woman in the audience goes, bubble wrap. So here's what happens. When I'm dealing with somebody toxic, I pretty quickly notice this happening. When suddenly my shoulders are in my ears, I'm like, something is wrong with this interaction. And I instantly think energy shields up. And as soon as I think that, a giant sheet of ice, shoop, drops between us. And everything relaxes at that moment. That sheet of ice shows up, and it's like, oh, here I am on my side of the wall, breathing the cool, crisp air of happiness, and you're over there being toxic. And I can respond, but I don't have to react. I watch your toxic words hit that sheet of ice and just melt down into a puddle on the floor. Sometimes I'm like standing like, I'm imagining what you're saying, reaching that puddle of ice on the floor. Practice. That takes practice. I know that sounds funny, but like you are going to encounter toxic people all day long. The person behind you in line at the grocery store who is complaining about people who use food stamps or whatever that person might complain about that you don't want to think that you're in their space. Energy shields up. Don't say it out loud. But just watch that energy shield and then feel how relaxed you are. Feel how happy you are. You can do that with your toxic boss. Now, I know that's hard. It's hard work. So I also heard you say you don't want to quit your job. Maybe release that belief too. There is probably a better job out there for you. And if your toxic boss is not going to change and your corporation is not addressing the fact that that person is toxic, don't limit yourself to the belief that this is the best job you can get. Okay, anything else? Yes.
Many companies have a suggestion box, and sometimes they even have the ability for people to talk about what they're concerned about, but sometimes managers dislike that because people they know everything that they dislike about the workplace. What has the research shown is the best way to get engagement in your company?
It's to listen. If you want engagement in your company, I did this is one of my favorite things. I used to do corporate culture assessments for companies. I don't because I'm running a tech company now. I just don't do that at all. But one of the funniest things that would happen when I do a corporate culture assessment is I do the reports to executives. And it's the same experience every time. The first thing I say is, we're never going to talk about who, we're only going to talk about what. Because I've interviewed all of your employees, and I'm sharing with you what they've told me, and I become the voice for them, right? It goes straight to who, every time. Every time. The employees in such and such division don't like that they're required to do overtime without pay, but these other employees who kind of have the same job aren't required to do overtime. And literally the first thing is, who said that? Who has a problem with that? And I can't emphasize enough, the who doesn't matter at all. If your employees are expressing this, it's because it's an issue. Now, a lot of times it's issues management doesn't want to deal with. They just don't. They can't fix that. This team has to do overtime. Find a way to sit down with that team and say, we know you're unhappy about this. What can we do to stay within the economics of this company and make you happier? It might be have rolling overtime for different people. It might be everybody gets one extra free day off a month. But if companies are focused on the solutions to what makes their employees unhappy, they're going to find solutions. And if they include the employees in those solutions, those employees will get a lot happier. But boy, that ignored suggestion box, you're better off not having a suggestion box. I'm not kidding. That is definitely what the research has shown. When employees express their unhappiness and it gets ignored, that's worse. It is the worst thing you can do, because now people are unhappy and they feel like they aren't being listened to. But boy, listening to your employees has an unbelievable impact. And this sounds ridiculous. Listening to your employees, acknowledging and then doing nothing, but explaining why you are doing nothing, has almost the same effect as fixing the problem. As long as people understand why the problem exists, or that you care about it, or that you're aware of it, or that you care whether or not they're happy, whether or not they're having a good experience working for you, that's going to keep them loyal.
Oh, one last question.
Okay, yes.
This will be quick. What advice do you give to startups that are at early stages in forming your culture?
That's a most important point is forming your culture. Choose your culture. And I'll give you 2 examples of this. My co-founder and I decided that we're just going to work with people who are nice. That seems funny. We turned down a coder. Like this person is a rock star. He was on the TensorFlow team. He would be great for this company. And in the second meeting, I just started noticing a lot of I words describing his previous work, never a we. I noticed sort of a dismissal of people who didn't understand some things he was working on. And I was just like, you know what? It's not going to be too long before you become difficult for everyone else to work with. And I just decided that's not the right fit for our company. And we decided that. There are some companies that want all rock stars all the time. They don't care how you behave. They want to make sure you're kicking ass every day. You eat glass for them. If that's what you want your company to be it. But I have a very funny story. I'll close out with this. I went to a very small group mastermind about corporate culture. And it was for startup CEOs. There were some investors in the room. There was a woman facilitating it. And one guy's like, we decided what our culture is going to be, which is absolute excellence from everybody. And if that means you're working, 20 hours a day, you're going to work 20 hours a day. And everybody's on the, we're all running a marathon together and blah, blah. He was like, he couldn't have been more hard driving about what he was going to demand of his culture. And the woman running the thing says, I think that sounds great. And at this point, I'm too old. I have no F's left to give. I was like, really? Because I think it sounds awful. And everybody in the room, there's like 19 people in the room, everyone's like, shoo, what? And then I said to him, what is your business? And he's like, oh, we're creating like the Yelp for household products. And I said, because like people can't trust Amazon reviews anymore and blah, blah, blah. So they're creating Yelp for household products. And I almost choked laughing. I said, really? Who is your target? And he was like, well, people who buy household. It's like, so you mean moms? Because the corporate culture you just described excludes moms. You are never going to get a single mother to work for you, period. And if you have a mother who works for you, she's going to be miserable because she's going to be constantly being told she has to drive harder and move. And I said, your entire customer base is not being represented by your workforce with the culture you just described. And everybody in the room was like, oh. So focusing on culture is really important as a startup. Look at your values, look at the workplace you want to create, and then just make sure you're always creating it. Stick to it. It's hard. It's hard when you need that AI programmer, and the one sitting right next to you would be a great person who would destroy your culture. But you got to make those decisions. Okay. Thank you so much.